Welcome back, Whisky fans. Obviously I've reviewed a couple of Laphroaig Cairdeas releases lately, and like I said before, these two are, on paper, very similar whiskies. They are both matured in warehouse number 1, they're both matured in 100% Maker's Mark first fill bourbon casks. There's a few minor differences. This one they give us an unofficial age statement, and I personally think that this one is probably a little bit older than this one. But they're kind of equivalent whiskies from different years, 8 years apart, so it would be rude really not to do an A-B comparison, head-to-head comparison tasting of these two seemingly similar Laphroaig Cairdeas releases. So I've got a glass of the 2015 Cairdeas here, and a glass of the current 2022 Cairdeas here. So let's have a nose and a taste, see what the differences are. I am going to have to be careful with these two because unlike the 10 cask strength and the 2022 Cairdeas comparison that I did, these are reasonably similar colours. So this is the 2015, so you can see there, I would say almost exactly the same colour, maybe slightly darker on the 2015. Does that suggest that the 2015, as I suspect, is slightly older? I think probably, but I'd say that they're probably both natural colour whisky. That's kind of what I would expect from around about a 10-year-old Laphroaig. So let's get things underway. Let's start with probably the current 2022 Cairdeas. So I'm going to nose and taste these at the same time. So nosing these together, I'd actually say there's more sort of maritime saltiness. That salt really catches your nose a little bit more on the 2015. I think that comparatively, the 2022 Cairdeas on the nose is that little bit sweeter and more cloying, more rounded. Slightly more fudgy and more indistinct, whereas the 2015 really cuts through that little bit more, a little bit sharper, saltier, more aggressive. I think, and I've said this before, it's probably a sign of the continuing sort of more bourbonisation of Laphroaig. Obviously these are both matured in 100% first fill bourbon casks, but I do think that it seems to me like Laphroaig is becoming a sweeter whisky. Absolutely 100% more aggressive on the nose of the 2015 Cairdeas. So on the nose, they're actually very close. They are reasonably similar. I think this one, the old Cairdeas from 2015, it just seems that little bit more aggressive. It's got a little bit more going on. Although if you like your whiskies very sweet and caramelly, then you might possibly prefer this year's Cairdeas. I was kind of expecting that this year's Cairdeas might have a little bit more intensity on the nose. But nosing these here, I'm actually going to say the opposite. I think that there's more intensity and more brininess, more distinct flavours, and probably a bit more complexity on the nose of the 2015. So let's see how they taste. So probably start with the 2015 on the palate. Fantastic whisky. 2015 Cairdeas. Some people complained that this was a bit too gentle, a bit lacking, and a bit too weak. I don't think that at all. I think, like I've said before, if you're comparing it to the 10 cask strength, then yeah, maybe those things are kind of relevant, but you're really not doing it any favours comparing it to something that's so much stronger. You're really setting it up to fail. I think that the flavours you get on the palate of the 2015 Cairdeas, they really highlight everything that's great about Laphroaig, really highlights that house style, lovely peatiness, lovely influence from the casks as well. You're getting really good influence from the casks, the barley, the wood, that maritime quality and the peat. It's all there. This is about as good as Laphroaig gets in my opinion. So let's compare it to the 2022 Cairdeas. Really good stuff, but it's not as good. I think that my decision to give the 2015 an A- and the 2022 a B+ was absolutely the right call. I think that the 2015, they're pretty close on the nose, but on the palate, I think that the 2015 seems distinctly older and more complex, possibly a little bit tamer, but really there's not a lot in it. I think that the 2015 is an absolutely stunning example of what Laphroaig can do. It's really the sort of whiskey that I enjoy. It's a very elegant, complex and well-made Islay whiskey. I really think, tasting these two head to head, that the difference between these, as I suspected, is probably age. So, as I mentioned before, this one, they gave an unofficial age statement for the older release of around 11 or 12 years. I think they said that it was bottled in 2015. I think they said it was mostly distilled in 2003. Whereas this year's Cairdeas 2022, they didn't give any age statement at all. If it was 10 years old, would they have said so? I feel like they probably would. Because if it is 10 years old, why would you not say? Because Laphroaig, to be fair to Laphroaig, they are a bit more progressive in age statements than other distilleries. As we know, they've discontinued their 18 and 15, the 16 is available in limited supply. So Laphroaig see the value in advertising a whiskey with a lowish age statement, whereas some distilleries, if something is 7 or 8 years old, they won't say so. But Laphroaig are proud of their 10-year-old age statements. I feel if this was a full 10 years old, they probably would have said so. And I really think that's a large part of the difference between these two whiskies. I think that this one is the better whiskey, relatively speaking. They're both great whiskies, but this one is better. And I think that's mainly down to that benefit of the extra 3 to 4 years in the cask. Although, obviously, that's just my estimate. Do I think that that trend would continue on if this whiskey from the floor maltings at Laphroaig and matured in those good high quality casks from Maker's Mark, if it was matured to 16 years old, would it be even better? I would say probably not. I think that this whiskey at 11 or 12 years old, I think that this is probably the pinnacle of peated Laphroaig whiskey. I think that if you mature it past this point, you're probably going to lose more in terms of the intensity of the phenols and the smokiness than you would gain from the maturity. Another thing that I was wondering is there a clear difference with this one being made from 100% floor malted barley on the Laphroaig floor maltings, whereas this one they don't tell us. It may be floor malted or it may be a mix of their floor malted barley and the Port Ellen stuff. I think yes, probably there is a difference there, but I think that difference is not as huge as you'd think. And I'd say that if you're paying a premium for a whiskey that's made with 100% Laphroaig floor malted barley, it's probably not worth paying a premium for. I think that the Port Ellen malt is really, really good stuff. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and there's a really good reason why that Port Ellen malted barley is used all over Islay. In my humble opinion, I think that the washbacks, the fermentation time, the stills, the casks, the barley variety, and the peat type, that Islay peat, and a bunch of other stuff probably all have a bigger effect than whether the barley is floor malted or malted on an industrial scale. Although, obviously, with other factors coming into play, it's probably hard to say for sure. Between these two, though, I think that they're both really good whiskies, and they're both kind of good value as well. I mean, this one I paid £65 for. If you tried to get it now, you're probably well into the 3 digits. I've seen this stuff sell for about £300 just because of the flipper factor. This stuff, if it's still available, you're going to get that for about £90. £90 for a whisky of this quality, I think, is, even though it's a reasonably low age statement, it's good value. I think that between the two, the 2022 is sweeter and quite a bit simpler, but they are very similar whiskies. I think that it's a close call between these two, and to really get a fair judgment, you need to do an A-B comparison. I think that if you gave me a glass of one of these blind, it would be a tough call to actually figure out which one you'd given me, because they are that close. Personally, doing an A-B comparison, if I had to choose between these two, I would go for the 2015, the old bottle. And I think a lot of that is just down to personal preference, because I do like whiskies that seem obviously older, and I especially appreciate whiskies that have that bit more complexity. I think that both of these Cairdeas releases both outclass the recent batches of the Laphroaig cask strength, although really only in complexity and nuance and the amount of flavours that you can pick out there, and not in terms of intensity. But then it has to be said that with both of these whiskies, Laphroaig have had the benefit of small batches with these, and they've really cherry-picked some really good casks to go into these, and they're both that little bit less available for most people and that little bit more expensive. So I hope you found this review interesting. Let me know what you think about how Laphroaig is changing over the years. Do you think I'm right that it does seem to be becoming that little bit more sweet and less complex and a little bit more cloying, a little bit more sanitized? I personally think that over the last 15 years, Laphroaig has really become much less aggressive, a much prettier, more sanitized, more agreeable whisky. Saying that though, as much as I like to give them a hard time for the presentation, the ABV, the filtration and all of that stuff, I do love Laphroaig. And unless they really bugger things up, I'm going to be a Laphroaig customer for life, because their whisky is just so easy to love. Anyway, you guys let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.